de hace tiempo y en verdad ella cuenta con, si tú buscas lo que es un Vimeo Staff Pick en la vida, probablemente salga su cara alrededor, al lado del Vimeo Staff Pick. Ella, su trabajo tiene un punto de vista muy personal y tiene el master skill de trabajar la animación en 2D y sobre todo el cel animation y el hand draw animation. Y no sé, él ha ganado bastantes premios, todos bastante merecidos. Y sobre todo, bueno, a mí lo que más me gusta, tiene un trabajo muy humano y un punto documental, pero la animación le permite dar pie a su psicodelia a nivel de transiciones y animaciones basado desde cero. Ella más bien hace máster de cada frame by frame animation y ella es una máster del dibujo en el sentido de que la animación va a 12 o 15 fotogramas por segundo y bueno, ya no sé, yo no voy a dar más pies más y la voy a dejar que comience. Ana.
Thank you. So I hope that was all good. I've got no idea. So I'm Anna Ginsburg. I am an animation director based in London. Some of you might have seen my work, some of you might not have. Thank you so much for having me, and also so much for there being such a big crowd. This makes me really, really happy. And I feel really lucky and excited. So this is a spinning aubergine that you've been looking at for a long time. So I'm showing you this because I think it reflects something about my process, which is I like mixing different types of animation. In this aubergine, there's 100 individual frames, each rendered in a totally different way. So some are hand-drawn, some are painted, some are laser-cut wood, dipped in like purple paint. One's made out of purple elastic bands. A couple are CGI. And this was for an interactive, ridiculous project called spintheaubergine.com, where you can go on the internet and spin 9 different aubergines, and each aubergine has its own original soundtrack. So if you spin it that way, the music plays that way. If you spin it that way, it plays that way, like scratching a disc. And it just so happened we released this project on the day that Trump was elected, which was just, I suppose, felt a bit even more stupid and vacuous, but at least was a silly distraction. So there were kind of crying people spinning aubergines all over the world. I'm now gonna, for those of you who might not have seen any of my work, I'm gonna play my show reel, which is just a montage of clips from work that I've made over the last 7 years, living and working in London as a director. Cool. So, I started off my career in music video. Hello. Which I think, I don't know who here are, how many students are there here to start with? Yeah, great, so loads. So when I was a student, so on my BA in the UK, I really didn't know what I wanted to say. I didn't at that point have a story to tell. And I started my career in music video because it served really, really well as a kind of audio-visual space to be silly when you didn't really have anything to say for yourself, but also the musical sound kind of works as like a skeleton to hang visuals onto. So you'd be like, on that beat, that's going to happen, or on that sound, that's going to happen, which I found really liberating. And you can do things like dress a girl in chips and try and get seagulls to attack her, or put fireworks on a synchronized swimmer's head, all in kind of the spirit of pop culture and the joy and the silliness that is possible within music video. Also, it's a good place for experimentation. So I experimented on this video with a technique called rotoscoping, which some of you might have tried, which is really simple, and it's just moving live action film footage into a program like Photoshop or After Effects and drawing over it, which is super, super easy, and you guys should try. Here's another example of rotoscoping. But in this video, we shot it in really even lighting and removed the dancer, and so we had an empty frame, so we could have that behind and rub the dancer out whenever we wanted her to disappear, and drew her in where she had been, which was quite fun. And then this was a music video for a rapper called Loyal Kana, where he would rap the choruses and the verses were really clear narratives. So he'd introduce the animation in a different way each time to tell those stories, which was quite, again, like a nice mix. And then again, so I don't know if you guys have access to a green screen, but that can be a really fun technique for experimentation with animation and live action. So this was really simple. We shot the dancers and the artists just on a green screen, and then on their costumes we had chroma blue patches that we could key out and use as screens, which again is so fun and so simple. And again, this was a really low budget thing at the very beginning of my career. And then this is stop motion. So this is replacement, if anyone's done like pixelation, you know, when you just take a photo but with a human there. So we just made 25 of these foam L's and then hand moved them in and out of shot to create this ripple. And in this music video we have some bits like this that are CGI and some that are physical. So again, it's quite like a experimental aesthetic. My other really big love is animated documentary. Has anyone here ever made one or seen one, or familiar with the genre at all? Not really anyone. Okay, so I'm going to tell you why it's powerful. Okay, so animated documentary is wonderful at visualizing the internal or emotional in a way that live action can't, whether it's through shape or color or abstract form. Also, as a filmmaker who's wanting to make a documentary about something that's maybe quite intimate or quite sensitive, you're more likely to get a really honest interview if you just are recording a voice and you put it on and you forget about it, than if you've got a camera in someone's face. So I think you can get really, really, really honest interviews. And then also having this drawing protecting the subject allows intimacy and empathy to flow from the audience to the person who's talking. So you guys see me now, and like we're all humans, we're all judgmental. You know, you'll be making judgments, but when you're protected with a drawing, it makes a really specific story suddenly like universally accessible. So I'm going to talk to you about a film called Private Parts, which was a film basically that changed my life. It is a short film that was commissioned for Channel 4 in the UK on sexual equality and masturbation, involving talking vaginas and penises. And yeah, I'm going to tell you why I wanted to make it and why I did make it and what it did for me. Has anyone here seen Cruel Intentions? Good. Okay. So when I was 15, I was ill in bed, and I had watched Cruel Intentions, and as a few of you might know, it's quite steamy and saucy, and I'd got quite hot under the collar, and I went on a crusade to achieve my first orgasm. 3 days into the illness, I managed it. And, you know, had recovered and kind of strutted into school on the Monday, which was a central London state school, and sat down with my group of female friends and was like, guys, like, there's this thing, like, let me explain what happens, like, it's kind of cool, like, I can draw a picture, I can draw a diagram, and the response was one of mutual disgust, and everyone was like, Anna touches herself, and it was like my first experience of sexual inequality, really. I thought, well, we know that the boys have been masturbating since primary school, sometimes together, sometimes to WWF wrestling, yeah? We've all got boobs, we've all got sexual desire, most of us have come on our periods, most of us are double the size of the boys anyway. What? Like, why is this so dirty? Why does this feel so strange? So then, skip forward about 5 years, I was on my art foundation in London and I saw this piece, which is called The Great Wall of Vagina by Jamie McCarthy. And this is only a small section, it's like absolutely massive and it's all these plaster cast panels. And it was the first time that I had seen vaginas in anything other than a medical or pornographic context. And even in PHSE, so in physical education in England, the drawings of vaginas were like beige triangles with ovaries just attached. And I was like, oh, you know, maybe my vagina isn't totally mad, totally strange. And it also got me thinking about the lack of visualization of vaginas in culture in general. So I'd seen drawings of penises on toilets, on school books, like on lampposts, since I was a really young child. No one was graffitiing vaginas all over our school. I then read the vagina monologues, which I'd heard ridiculed a lot in pop culture. So I only knew it from Friends. There's an episode of Friends where they laugh about it as like a feminist kind of rant. And then I read it really proudly on public transport in London, and it was such a revelation. It was really funny, really emotional, sometimes really sad, really honest. It was very accessible, so it was organised into chapters like pubic hair, the clitoris, and I would highly recommend it, but it really kind of inspired me in terms of this wide breadth of female voices. And then this app was released, which is called Happy Playtime, which involves this quite strange vulva character wearing like a little bonnet, who encourages you to explore and to masturbate as a woman. I think it's a really strange, creepy design, but I suppose good overall. And it was banned from the App Store in a day when apps like this, wrist off, where you see how many strokes you can get in a certain amount of time. You can get that right now today. It's still available. And then just being a woman moving through the world and becoming old enough to be a little bit more astute to the images that I was consuming in advertising, and kind of what they were telling me about what it was to be a woman and what femininity is. And it seemed to me to be totally inactive, so like hairless, vulnerable, waiting for things to happen to you rather than doing those things. And if I hadn't tried to have an orgasm for 3 days straight, I wouldn't have managed it. And I'm sure anyone here who's got a vagina or has had any interaction with a vagina knows that it takes quite a lot of active engagement. So I thought this idea of femininity is not conducive to good sex for women or men, and is tired and it's boring. And then this was released, which is an advert for Calvin Klein, where the woman, barely looks conscious, kind of resembles gang rape. And then this as well. Which I just, again, found to be the antithesis of any kind of nice female pleasure experience. So I went to the studio and designed some jolly vaginas to try and make myself feel better. And this was the initial, these cutouts obviously are so simple, and there's just the clitoris, the vagina, the bumhole, and a little suggestion of pubes. But it was me really trying to think, if these vaginas were going to talk, how could they talk? How could I simplify such a kind of complex form into something that resembles a human face? I did the same with some penises. And eventually I went back to line, because I thought, if I'm going to make these vaginas talk, never underestimate, as an animator, never underestimate the power of eyebrows. Eyebrows are everything, and I needed the pubes so much to be my eyebrows. So I went back to line for that extra character you can get from eyebrows. So then I started interviewing loads of mainly friends. These are my old friends Luke and Sam, who shouldn't have their name in this presentation, but you'll see when we watch the film in a minute. In my mind, they're kind of the stars of the film, which I didn't expect. I didn't expect two men to be the stars. And actually, in the process of making this film, it was so heartening, because I was honestly looking for dickheads. I was sitting in bars trying to find evil men to interview who didn't want women to have orgasms, and I basically just couldn't find them, which was lovely and a lovely revelation, but also showed to me that this idea of shame goes back through history, goes back to ideas in religion. It's not contemporary people that are feeling these things, it's inherited, and it's more complicated than that. So I was designing for Luke and Sam, and I'd done about 40 interviews with people I met on the street, friends of my parents, and had just done 15 seconds of these two chit-chatting. And then It's Nice That got in touch, saying, there's this project, Channel 4, late night Channel 4 in the UK, want to commission short films that are 3.5 minutes. We have a £2,000 budget and 5 weeks. Do you have anything? So I sent them the talking penises, and they were sold, so that was great. But £2,000 and 5 weeks to make a 3.5 minute hand-drawn animation is pretty much impossible. So what I did was I reached out to 12 of my favourite animators from all over the world, people at this point that I'd written about in my dissertation that were my absolute idols, and said, please, 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 all you have to do is stick to this colour palette, use a few different Photoshop brushes that I'll give you, and you can design in whatever way you see fit, and take full responsibility for one of these characters, so one of these genitals. And 11 out of the 12 said yes. And I set up a Dropbox, and talking genitals started flooding in from all over the world. And I've never felt happier or more humbled, because it really was, I was a nobody at this point. I didn't even have a production company, I wasn't signed, and it felt like everyone believed in the idea and believed in the sound edit, so the interviews. So because basically everyone was getting paid like £100 each, I only allowed myself one round of feedback. So this is an example of vagina feedback. So most of the animators working on this film were men. So when giving vagina feedback, you don't want to act like you don't think that they've ever seen a vagina before. And this guy, Will Anderson, who's like a BAFTA winning, he's an incredible animator, but he often animates birds talking. So I didn't want the lips of the vagina to become like a bird's beak. I just gave him one round of feedback on that. And then, so this is my favourite aesthetic. This is my favourite clip visually from the entire of Private Parts. And it goes back to the hybrid thing about the aubergine at the start. So this is a section in the film where the boy is talking about how vaginas are like Rubik's Cubes, and you can be with a girl for years and years and never really understand. But then at the end he says, just joking. So listen up that. But so this was an amazing graphic designer based in Amsterdam called Mark Prendergast, who rendered this really crude CGI vagina Rubik's Cube, okay, and then took 2 weeks off work to hand spray paint over every frame. So you get this amazing dancing quality, and he was sending me photographs of his room just covered in spray painted vaginas, and yeah, it was just really, really amazing. I felt really lucky. So let's watch the film, and I'm sorry if it's hard to understand. A lovely, lovely man called Quim, translated this whole film into Catalan for me, but I couldn't drop them on the subtitles, but thank you so, so, so much. So yeah, here we go.
Clit.
I don't know, for JJ.
Pants or a bikini that's too tight, and pseudocreme.
I think it's speculum, because the feminist groups used to meet and with a speculum look at their own and each other's vaginas. So just explore what is down there, that down there.
Yeah, Rubik's Cube. Sometimes it's like quite straightforward, sometimes it doesn't work like that. You can be with girls for years and not really understand. No, just joking.
A vagina could never be ugly to me because it's a vagina. It's a vagina. That's it.
Girls have got to realise it can be ugly to anyone.
I like the mystery of not knowing I know that each and every vagina is going to be different.
Try to find.
Clitoris, I think, orgasm.
Hot heat.
When a girl is about to...
It's the thing that you touch and
I got that
like
snap
like
memory.
Puppet, you know what I mean?
I get that snap. I remember that shit. That eye rolling, clenching, looking back feeling.
The pearl in the pearl inside those shells in the sea, you know? Shiny, shiny, shiny.
While we're foreplaying and this and that and we're about to have sex, I've got to pull a hair out of my mouth. That is not sexy.
Oh, I don't care. I'm down.
You eat them.
I'll eat that.
Girls' vagina has to be shaved, like good, it has to be nice and fresh.
They just need to shave. I'm telling them to put their clothes back on. Oh, don't want to be one of those girls. Better get a bikini wax. Because, you know, don't want to be, like, seen as disgusting.
Why do you need to be bald down there? Is that necessary? It's a lot of money.
It was definitely a thing of thinking that there was something wrong, or that it was a dangerous thing to do, especially on your bathroom floor at 5 o'clock in the afternoon after you've eaten an avocado.
If you can't even do it on your own and feel comfortable on your own, how are you supposed to orgasm with someone else?
Masturbating, obviously I'm thinking about someone I fancy, or like Michael Fassbender. Do you know what I mean? Like you can make it happen, and yet when you've got an actual beautiful boy in front of you, why aren't I connecting? Like for me, that's kind of a joke. Like if someone's like, "Did you come?" I'll be like, "Oh, it's not," and then we move on.
Just started to feel like I could touch myself while I was having sex to help myself get there, and that wasn't an insult.
More bean flicking, please.
How do you do it? Have you done it? Because they'll just like be like, ooh. It's like you wouldn't talk about it out loud. Because, you know, probably be embarrassed.
Don't get depressed, like, be who you are. You do yourself, you get me? Good on you girls, just be good. No depressing moments, just stay good. If you do feel lonely, just give man a call, 0721 739, done now.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So then in between that, I did loads of music videos, a couple commercials, and so this was now 3 summers ago. Yeah. So 3 summers ago, my little sister Maya was hospitalised with anorexia for the 3rd time. She's been suffering with anorexia from the age of 12, and she's now 21. And that time round, she was in intensive care and she was being fed using a tube, and she couldn't walk. She was like in a wheelchair. And witnessing her suffering that time was so heavy on me. I was thinking about it all the time. Like what pushes a child of 12 to starve themselves. And I started reflecting on the images that she would have been looking at that age, and thinking a lot about cultural body ideals, and just trying to unpick it really, as I'm sure anyone would. But also, interestingly, that summer I was very drunk at one point, and I was in like a public toilet, and I started kissing my own arms. I was like, because I just felt for the first time such appreciation for having like healthy, busy limbs and like a non-violent relationship with my body, and I've never looked at my limbs. Had never looked at my limbs that way, and I felt incredible love and gratitude for that. So then I stumbled across this, and this is the oldest woman in the world. This is Venus of Willendorf, who is the first recorded rendering of the female form, dating back to about 28,000 BC. She's a fertility goddess, and finding her got me down a fertility goddess path of joy, where I started comparing them, studying them, drawing them. I just thought that they were obviously so different in many ways from any of the beauty ideals that I've been surrounded by in my life, but also I just thought that they were so diverse. You'd go to any different ancient civilization and they would be different. And the focus was on like strength and solidity and sturdiness and reproduction as well. Which then led me to ancient Greece. So in ancient Greece, I discovered that if you were a woman who had quite a masculine physique, you were seen as incredibly beautiful because the male form was really put on a pedestal in Greek culture through the Olympics and sculpture and all different forms of art, which communicated again to me the power of imagery. So if you're a woman with broad shoulders, quite small breasts and quite small hips, you were seen as incredibly beautiful. And then I was looking at Renaissance women, and it reminded me of a trip that I'd taken at secondary school to a gallery with my teacher, and she'd been like, girls, you know, how wonderful, look how kind of curvy and voluptuous these women are, and it's that, you know, they're great. And I was like, yeah, and I see what she was trying to say, but on closer looking at these forms now, I was thinking, still, it's kind of an interesting mix of like fat and muscle. The boobs are perfectly circular and really far apart, like almost under the armpits. So I feel like a Renaissance woman would be going through stress, trying to separate her boobs and get the perfect balance of muscle and fat in the exact same way. So it felt unattainable, but in a different way. And then I looked at Tudor beauty ideals, which were to put belladonna plant in your eye, which would make your pupil go massive, because it was sexy to have huge black pupils all the time, but that would make you go blind, and also to pluck your hairline back, so you had a massive shiny forehead, and then also to put white lead and vinegar into your skin that would give you this unnaturally white glow, and make you, well, it would lead to death. So, yeah. And then the rise of the corset, so Victorian times. So I'm embarrassingly obsessed with period dramas, and in period dramas, women are always fainting and kind of having funny turns and are always having to take to their beds. And I think it could possibly be because of extreme organ restriction, problems with breathing and digestion caused by corsets. And then I looked at some of my favourite renderings of the female form. So obviously Matisse. In this, I felt like there was so much less focus on the intricacies and the precision of the bodies, and it was more on female solidarity and movement. And then Picasso, it was often more like these stolen moments where you felt like you were witnessing a woman just totally resting. There was no like, come hither. There was no male gaze. And obviously the forms are so robust and strong. And then moving on to the flapper girls. So in the 1920s, it was incredibly cool to have no hips at all, so just straight down. And have this kind of mysterious androgyny where you look quite masculine. To the 50s, so post-war America, this age of consumption, this really hourglass physique of Marilyn. Moving on to Twiggy, who was a reaction against 1950s glamour in many ways. So she's got this childlike physique and this really cropped, not particularly glamorous hair. And then again, it feels like every time it's a reaction against the last thing. So Madonna was this moving away from childlike, super kind of sexually expressive, again, physically strong. And then Pam, popularizing the breast implant. In the late 80s, early 90s, to Grace Jones, who was a really interesting icon who described herself as outside of race and gender, and she could move from this kind of executive masculinity to like really seductive femininity in images, which is quite interesting. And then moving on to the 90s, this is the Versace 5. Who were the biggest 5 supermodels of that era. And as you can see, they're all slim, they're all white, they're all pretty much identical in terms of body type. But when you compare it to the noughties, so the images my little sister was consuming, they're really healthy looking. In hindsight. So that girl in the middle went to my school, and she used to get really tired, and it was probably, because she was quite hungry. So I have another little sister who's 3 or nearly 4 years younger, and we have a whole different problem on our hands. So within a mere 3-4 years, the beauty ideal has changed again. And I do a lot of stalking of the younger one through social media. So I look at what she likes on Instagram. I'm obsessed with her whole group of friends on Instagram. I often write severely dislike under photos of like her kind of just of her boobs or something, and she'll just delete it over and over again, and I'll just write severely dislike, severely dislike, severely dislike. And then at Christmas, she was like, I'm going to show you my real Instagram grid. And she'd like blocked me from seeing loads of the images, and I was like, this is worse than I feared. So anyway, there's always been this brand of gruesome, grotesque brand of objectification called dismemberment, where, in advertising you cut up a female body through imagery to sell something, but it promotes the idea that a woman is merely a sum of all her parts rather than like a thinking, feeling individual. And this has been prevalent in advertising for basically since the dawn of advertising. But recently on social media, and my little sister and her whole friendship group do it all the time, there's self-objectification and self-dismemberment. So young women are constantly cutting their heads off and hacking up their bodies. And I've researched the long-term impact of doing this, and it leads to obviously depression, eating disorders, shame, anxiety, but it also compromises physical ability. So in sports or in sex, you have this third-person perspective experience because you've objectified yourself so much that you're seeing yourself from that angle. So you can't actually engage with things like sexual pleasure or physical activity in the same way that you would if you hadn't been doing it. And also it drains mental resources, because if you're in a work environment or somewhere where you have to overcome a confidence gap, if you're so busy objectifying yourself through the eyes of the people you're speaking to, that's a huge drain on mental resources, which women already have to overcome quite a lot of adversity in different environments. So I decided to make a film that I didn't think would solve any of these problems or promote and inspire self-love in a society that makes that incredibly hard for women and for men. But I just wanted, for International Women's Day, to provide like a little protective armour for women, even if it's only lasts the duration of the film, to remind you how quickly these ideals change, and that trying to keep up with this ever-shifting idea of beauty is not only totally impossible and pointless, it's also really dangerous and can lead to so much suffering. So I also wanted to remind people that at some point in history, your body really was the definition of beauty. So let's watch What is Beauty?
What is beauty? Look how often its definition changes. Reflect on the ideals imposed upon us and how fast they evolve. Because there is no standard template for beauty. So let us celebrate the diversity of the female form.
Thank you. So, last October, I was in an extremely bad way. I just directed a disgusting and really embarrassing advert for a bank in the UK and felt like potentially I never wanted to make another film ever again. I felt like maybe my creative drive had been extinguished forever. It had been horrible. I'd spent the whole summer with a gaggle of 12 bankers who were obviously doing coke in the toilet, just shouting at me. And it was so crap. The film is so horrible. Okay, so anyway, I was in a really, really terrible state. And basically, I don't want you guys to think that I just go through life making personal project after personal project, just expressing myself. It's like, no, I still make, I wish I didn't have to, and I probably don't. I could probably do more teaching, actually. It maybe isn't that forgivable, but I have made adverts to fund things like that, and I just want to let you know that because it's difficult to make money without doing advertising. So I was disturbed and depressed, and I was scrolling through Instagram, and I saw a very beautiful painting by Melissa Kitty Jarham, who you should all follow, who's incredible. And I was so relieved because seeing these paintings, I got this real fire in my belly of wanting to make them move. And I was like, oh, I'm not done, I'm not retired. Like, I've got more juice in me yet. So I started messaging her on Instagram, and I actually felt so excited that I felt like I was like flirting. I was being like, it's like I wanted my work to like get with her work kind of thing. So we went for a coffee, and she was like, yeah, excited about it. She was like, maybe we'll make a few short loops for Instagram. And I was like, okay, yep, that's fine, that's great, that's enough, fine. And I ran to my studio, really excited that she'd kind of given me permission to explore with trying to make these paintings move. And my first thing was I didn't want to lose this. She does all of her paintings with acrylic on paper, and I didn't want to lose that quality because I do everything on Photoshop. So this is the original painting that I decided to animate, and this is my digital version. You can obviously tell a difference in terms of saturation, but I felt pretty excited that I could get that close just through 5 Photoshop brushes, which you can all just get on. They're like Kyle's brushes on Photoshop. And that got me excited that I would be able to make her, like, it seem like a moving painting. So then I started doing a line test with this painting, which I just wanted to see where I'd end up if I started animating her painting. And I made these characters be a bit like I was like, oh, it's me and Melissa, yeah. And then got them to like write out our initials, and I was like, yeah, that's so cool. And basically I was like, I got so excited by this as like a little trailer that I went in and coloured it all frame by frame, which was a mad process because you're treating each individual frame like an individual painting. So you're using about, like, I don't know, I was layering the oranges, I was like rubbing into the orange to get that imperfect line, and to make a single frame took about an hour. So to make a second, which is 12 frames, it took 12 hours. So it's probably might be my maddest, most labour-intensive animation process yet, but I was really into it, so I didn't really care. And then this was the finished test. So I showed that to Melissa, she was excited. I showed it to my production company and they were excited, which meant a lot because they hadn't given me any money for What Is Beauty, but they toured it around the whole of the UK and got a lot of money out of it. So they decided to give me £8,000 to develop this into an actual short film. And this is the first time really in my personal led projects where an aesthetic led rather than the idea. So we had this aesthetic we were super excited about, but we didn't really have anything to say, which was fine, but is a strange way round. So me and Melissa started kind of trying to find a story to tell, and we came across the work of Warsan Shira, who's a British Somali poet. And I'm not a poetry fanatic. I'm not particularly interested in poems, but there was something about her poetry which was so visual and linked so beautifully to Melissa's work and was also so accessible that we became obsessed. We bought all her poetry books and we read all we could. We found the poem we loved the most. And then basically me and Melissa made this, I have to say, it was beautiful PDF. It was like an extreme love letter of all these paintings inspired by this one poem, all this writing. We were so proud of it. And we sent it to the only email that was available on the internet, which was her agent. And because we only had this very limited budget, so we could offer her £1,000 for the rights to make it into this short animation, the agent was refusing to send it to Warsan Shira because it just wasn't commercially viable. So often the case where two artists are trying to, there's no way of reaching them, and there's a middleman who doesn't want to do it because there's not enough money. So we ended up banging our head against the wall. We were DMing her on Instagram, the poet, she wasn't responding. We noticed on Instagram that here was her phone number and personal email. So we started deluging her. We were texting. Please look at our PDF, please. And she said, if I look at this thing, will you stop texting me? And we were like, yes, we'll delete your number. And she was like, where did you get my number? And we were like, from your Instagram. She instantly took it off Instagram. So anyway, basically, she looked at it. And 3 days later, she gave us permission. And she sent us an amazing voice recording of her reading the poem. And the only other person that she's granted permission to visualize her words is Beyonce. So it was a beautiful PDF. So she wrote the words for Beyonce's Lemonade, so in between all the tracks. She's absolutely incredible. You guys should read her poems. They're so cool. So anyway, this poem is about the experience of being a refugee, again, which is not my experience. So this was a new challenge, and together me and Melissa were trying to visualize these words. It isn't Melissa's experience either. So we were trying to visualize these words and do them justice. So here are some initial line drawings inspired by the poem that we both did. So in this process, we did all this drawing, and then we started blocking out what drawings we wanted in what section. And then we did a really intricate storyboard, and then an animatic, which is the words of the poem with the images. And then once that was done, we started blocking out the line. So this is the line animation. And it was just a really exciting process, and I felt so drained after that godforsaken bank advert that it was so nice to be working with someone's aesthetic and someone's words and trying to make it into something, like applying myself to someone else's vision almost. I felt that it was really, really what I needed. So we released the film on June 20th, which is World Refugee Day, as part of a fundraiser, and it got screened at Glastonbury Music Festival for Refugee Week as well, and it's doing the festival circuit now. So it's my latest film, and it's called Ugly, and the words of Warsan Shira.
Ugly. Your daughter is ugly. She knows loss intimately, carries whole cities in her belly. As a child, relatives wouldn't hold her. She was splintered wood and seawater. She reminded them of the war. On her 15th birthday, you taught her how to tie her hair like rope and smoke it over burning frankincense. You made her gargle rose water, and while she coughed, said, Ma'anta, girls like you shouldn't smell of lonely or empty. You are her mother. Why did you not warn her? Hold her like a rotting boat and tell her that men will not love her if she is covered in continents, if her teeth are small colonies, if her stomach is an island, if her thighs are borders. What man wants to lie down and watch the world burn in his bedroom? Your daughter's face is a small riot. Her hands are a civil war, a refugee camp behind each ear, a body littered with ugly things. But God, doesn't she wear the world well?
Thank you. And that's the end. So you've been a wonderful audience. Thank you so, so much. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Anna, for the lecture.
Pleasure.
Any question? ¿Alguna pregunta? Por ahí abajo no veo si hay alguien que levanta el brazo.
Hey, Anna.
Hi.
Thank you so much for your work. It's been so inspiring.
Oh, thank you.
And one of my questions is, because you say at the beginning that you like music and mix videos.
Yeah.
Are these songs or sounds made by you?
No, absolutely not. No. I was lucky enough to know a band called Bombay Bicycle Club, who are like an indie band from the UK when I was young. And I was really, really lucky because in my final year of university, I managed to do a smaller music video for them. And that kind of got me into the industry a bit. But I don't know if this is anything to do with your question, but I would recommend that if you have any musical friends and you're interested in music video, or you're a musician, really go for it. Any kind of music that inspires you, you never know where someone's going to end up. And often the audio-visual collaboration side can really grow into something wonderful. So for Bombay Bicycle Club, it was like something that went on for like 5 years. I did the whole world tour visuals. It was really, really an amazing. It held me while I was like finding my voice in terms of narrative, etc. So yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
¿Más preguntas? More questions?
Hello, Anna. Thank you for your amazing speech. Could you give us, like, as young creatives, any advice at like how to live with your work and how to like organize everything? And
I think that's a great question, and I'm so glad there's so many students here. So I hadn't even, sorry, I'm answering this terribly. So I did Art Foundation in London, okay, and I had got in to do architecture all over the place, and I'd never cared about animation. I'd never really watched animation. I'd never done an animation until I got my offers for architecture, and a tutor called Yoji was like, "You've got in everywhere to do architecture. Why not just do something that you're never going to be able to do again? Like, just have fun. It doesn't matter if you fail." And because of him, I did 6 weeks of animation that have changed the rest of my life. I just instantly pulled out of all. It was the only eureka light bulb moment I've ever had in my life where loads of things come together. So like my love of sound, my love of storytelling, painting, sculpture, model making, which I was into at the time because I did stop motion stuff, all came together, and I just pulled out of all the architecture stuff and went around with my DVD trying to transfer with this one little film on. And I think basically now's the time to take risks and try things and act like you don't care if you're going to fail. That's not my attitude. Like, if he hadn't said to me, just do it for the sake of doing it, don't worry about external outcomes, I wouldn't have done it. And I would be doing a planning application for a building in London right now. You know, like, it's mad to think that made a difference. And then the other thing I would say is, I was lucky enough so I graduated in 2012. At this point, I didn't even have Instagram. I barely had Vimeo. I really did not exist in the oversaturated climate that all of you guys exist in terms of imagery, moving image. I feel like if I did, I might have been paralyzed, because I feel like even now, when I sit down to try and make something, I feel so overwhelmed by everything that everyone else is doing that often I feel like there's no point, everything's been done, you know? And actually, it's sometimes really, really good. Obviously, it's great to research, and that's amazing, but it's sometimes great to just be like, I need to turn it all off and just focus on what you want to make. Because now's the time for like experimentation and not kind of trying to be trendy or follow trends or, you know, yeah.
What is your biggest goal as an artist?
Wow. No one's ever asked me that before. An Oscar. No, I mean, I'm semi-joking, because I actually, obviously that'd be great, but that for me, genuinely, just being able to do what I do and survive is pretty. It's like a huge. I feel very proud.
So that would be your idea of success.
Yeah, and I think as well, like it's a really hard thing to do, and it's taken me all 7 years to kind of work out how to do it. But the balance of doing commercial work, doing personal work, and then for me, I do teaching. So I do teaching with young people at the BFI in London. If I didn't do teaching, I don't think I'd have the drive to make my personal work, because seeing how quickly young people, you give them like a week brief and they come back with like hilarious, mad, finished films, you know, that makes me feel like, oh God, the youths are coming for the throne. I need to do some work. But like also the balance, so the balance of the commercial work that keeps my agency happy and keeps them putting little bits of money into my personal work, and then the teaching is like a juggling act that I've kind of only recently worked out, and I think it's a good one, and I'd recommend it.
How old are you?
I've just turned 30. Yeah.
No, I'm saying this because when people do art, normally they don't think they can't make art, which is their passion, their livelihood. And I think seeing people like you really helps to make them realize that it's possible and that you're a human, actually, you know, so they can do it too.
Thank you. Well, I think it is possible, basically. I think you've kind of got to have a bit of a Robin Hood approach of like, I'll do a commercial as long as it's not fully, like I'll do a commercial and I'll save that money and I'll try and like let it fund my next 6 months of personal stuff, and I'll go work with some young people who like put the fear into me, and like, you know, so it's like, I think it is possible. I think you guys shouldn't be feeling like that. I think you can make it work. Yeah.
Hola.
Hola.
I was wondering, so you said you started with music video, and then you went to animation. So what was the transition like from going to animation to directing animation? And what skills do you think you've developed or require for that position?
Really good question. So moving from music video to animation was kind of natural, because I'd done a lot of animated music videos. I studied animation at BA, so I'd done 3 years of animation. Moving from animating my own work to directing, again, I think music videos was good because I was directing other people, especially when you're shooting live action. That's quite if you're shooting film footage, you're often in a situation which is quite high pressure, and you're dealing with a lot of people. I feel like the directing thing, it's been a bit of a fake it till you make it as well. So for things like Private Parts, I mean, I was hardly directing, you know. I was just saying, don't make a vagina look like the beak of a bird, but do your thing, you know. So it was kind of like gradually getting to a point where, but then also I know that I am lucky in that when I have an idea and I feel excited about it, and I have an external deadline, never underestimate the importance of an external deadline. So I wouldn't have probably got Private Parts done without Channel 4 saying it needs to be done by this day. And then I wouldn't have maybe got What is Beauty done unless CNN were going to release it on their platforms for International Women's Day. So that really helped. Always, even if it's like, you know, a competition or like an exhibition or something, you know, that's self-imposed, try and get a deadline to finish your personal stuff, otherwise it will just spread it will just spread out forever. Because it could always be a tiny bit better. There's things in What Is Beauty that I don't like. There's things in Private Parts that I don't like. But it's good enough. Just get it out the door, you know? But with the directing thing, I do feel lucky in that if I have an idea, I do feel often like able to communicate my excitement about it to other people. And I think that is part of the battle of getting people invested in your project. I don't think directing, I think people, especially young women, get scared of the idea of directing, quite rightfully, because there's so many more male directors in animation and in live action, and there is a confidence gap. But I feel like actually it just is to do with knowing your idea inside out. So knowing how to communicate what you need from each shot. And it's that simple. You know, you don't need to be all kind of over the top. You can just know what you want. Simple, yeah.
More questions?
Hi.
Hi.
I don't know if you've ever dealt with an artist block or thinking that that you lack imagination. How you come out of that mental state?
So for me, I feel like that a lot, and I feel like I often need to go. So I collaborate with other artists a lot. I often need to go outside of myself. So like I said, either with music, video used to really help with that, because I didn't feel like I was making decisions. I felt like I was just listening to the music, and I'd be like, oh, of course, you know, the boy jumps off a moon at that moment. You know, it was almost like the ideas were just coming to me. And yeah, often collaboration, so finding someone that you love the work of and being like, what can I bring to this? What can I do with you? Gets your juices flowing. Because often so with What Is Beauty, it was all designed by me, but I was really trying to communicate something. So I had this drive. But often if you're just trying to, you know, design something beautiful, I get stuck, you know, so I need to kind of look outside of myself. And there's no shame in collaboration or being inspired by something else, you know. So it's the same for the poem. It's like we didn't know what we wanted to say, so we found something we thought was beautiful, you know. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
That's okay. Thank you.
Preguntas? More questions?
Hi.
Hi.
I was thinking if, do you always work frame by frame, or do you sometimes use interpolation like After Effects? Because, I don't know, I do motion graphics, and now I'm starting to do more analog. But as you say, yes, it takes so long, so I see your work. And how? do you mix? How do you do it?
I don't use After Effects, but there's no shame in using After Effects. Honestly, like, it's because I just don't know After Effects. Often people will come in to the studio and be like, you could have done this so much easier. Like, it's, there are a lot of, so with frame by frame, there are a lot of workarounds you can do in After Effects that still have that, like, sensibility. So you can kind of fake the boil thing, which is where you have the line dancing all the time. You can do things where like certain things like zooms and stuff are all done in After Effects, but you just fake it with like handmade textures. I basically when I get started, I just end up doing it all by hand, and people are like, this is not sustainable. Like, this is really stupid. But maybe that will change as I get old and tired.
Thank you.
¿Más preguntas? Five, four, three.
Hi.
Hi.
I wanted to ask you about what's the philosophy, I don't know, or the concept when you start a project. I don't know. Your older projects, some of them are based on the female concept, equality, but what more? I don't know.
Well, that's a really good question. I feel like I've never, with the three, I've only made 3 personal short films that you've seen today. So Private Parts, What is Beauty, and Ugly. The rest have all been music video or tour visuals or commercials. But with each of those films, I've never, it's been a quite organic process. So with Private Parts, you know, the seed for that idea started when I told everyone that I'd had an orgasm and they were disgusted, you know. It's something that like grew slowly. I didn't have that idea at art school even, you know. It took moving through the world as an adult to think, oh, I want to say something about women feeling, you know, disempowered in sex, you know. So, and then the same with What is Beauty, it was like seeing my sister, you know, got me thinking. It was never like, I need to make a short film. So often you kind of need to give yourself space to notice things in your life or let things come, you know? I feel like a lot of people kind of force themselves to make work because they feel they should, when actually, if you can find a way of making money, whether it's music videos or commercials or working on someone else's short film so you can learn more, I don't think you necessarily should have to force a concept, you know? So they came very naturally is I suppose the answer.
Thank you.
That's okay.
¿Una pregunta más? Thank you, Anna. It's been great.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.